I don't know who I came to talk to today, but somebody in here has been praying and still wondering, where is God? You've been crying out, but the situation hasn't changed. You've been on your knees, but the heavens feel like brass. You've been fasting, seeking, knocking, and yet the door still hasn't opened. And maybe, just maybe, you've begun to wonder, is prayer even working? Let me tell you something today that might just change your life. Prayer by itself doesn't change everything, but prayer with purpose, that's what changes everything. You see, it's not just about saying words. It's not about using religious vocabulary. It's about knowing the power behind the words. When those words are aimed with purpose, filled with faith, and aligned with God's will. Some of us have been using prayer like a spare tire, only pulling it out when there's a flat. But prayer wasn't meant to be your backup plan. It was designed to be your battle plan. Prayer is not passive. Prayer is not weak. Prayer is not for the desperate only. Prayer is for the destined. Because when prayer is aimed with purpose, heaven pays attention. Hell starts trembling and your situation starts shifting. You see, God never called us to perform prayer. He called us to experience Him through prayer. This isn't about routine. This is about revelation. It's about power. It's about purpose. If your prayer life has been dry, if you've been weary, if you've been wondering why you're not seeing the hand of God move, it might be because your prayer has lost its purpose. And today I want to walk you through a shift that's not just about praying more, but about praying right, about praying with clarity, about praying with expectation, about praying in such a way that heaven has to respond, because you're not just talking, you're partnering with the King of Kings for the agenda of His kingdom. So don't tune out. Don't get distracted. Don't miss this moment, because I believe by the time we're done, somebody's prayer life is going to be set on fire. Somebody's heart is going to be reconnected to heaven. And somebody's going to realize that when you pray with purpose, you don't have to chase miracles. Miracles start chasing you. Now, if you're ready for God to breathe power into your prayer life, lean in, because we're about to go deep. And when we come out, you won't just have heard a sermon. You'll have stepped into a supernatural shift. Let me know if you want the transition into key point 1 to continue immediately. Ask ChatGPT. Now let's go deeper, because the first thing you've got to understand is this: prayer with purpose begins with relationship, not ritual. I know we live in a world that likes to automate everything, our schedules, our reminders, even our spiritual lives. We want things quick, polished, predictable. But God is not a vending machine. You don't just punch in a few memorized lines and expect a blessing to drop down. This isn't about religious performance. It's about relational presence. See, a whole lot of people are praying, but not everybody is connecting. And there's a difference. You can say all the right words. You can even say them loud, say them long, say them with tears. But if there's no relationship, there's no power. If you don't know who you're talking to, and if you're not sure He knows you, then your prayer becomes empty noise instead of spiritual authority. That's why Jesus didn't say this prayer and you're good. No. He said, when you pray, say, Our Father. Don't skip that. Don't rush past that. The power starts right there. Our Father. He's not some distant cosmic force. He's not some mystical being sitting way up high in the heavens with no interest in your life. He's your Father. And that means you're not coming to a stranger. You're coming to someone who loves you, who created you, who cares deeply about the details of your life. But let me press it a little further, because we can't just call Him Father if we're not willing to live as His children. A lot of folks want to pray like a child of God while living like a stranger to God, and then wonder why the prayer doesn't seem to break through. See, when you're walking in relationship, it shifts your entire approach. You don't come begging, You don't come uncertain. You don't come pretending. You come boldly because you know who he is and you know who you are to him. Relationship gives your prayer context. You're not shooting words up into the sky hoping they land somewhere. You're entering the throne room of grace, and you've been given access, not because you're perfect, not because you've earned it, but because you're a child of the King. And let me tell you something, when a child cries out to a loving father, that father responds. But ritual is cold, it's mechanical. It's what we do when we're trying to impress people more than connect with God. You can say grace at the table, repeat the Lord's Prayer every night, throw around God bless you like punctuation, and still be completely disconnected. Because purpose doesn't live in repetition. Purpose lives in relationship. And let's be real. Some of us have learned how to pray publicly, but we've forgotten how to pray privately. We've learned the church voice, the church phrases, the way to make it sound spiritual, but our hearts are still dry. We know how to look holy in front of people, but we haven't been honest with God in a long, long time. And that's where the power is. The power isn't in polished language. The power is in raw honesty. It's when you say, God, I'm tired. God, I'm confused. God, I don't understand, but I still trust you. God would rather have your messy truth than your fake perfection. He's not impressed by flowery words. He's moved by faithful words that come from the soul. And that only happens when the relationship is real. That only happens when prayer stops being something you do out of obligation and starts being the space where you breathe in his presence. Because when the relationship is right, the conversation is natural. You don't have to schedule it, you crave it. You don't have to be reminded to do it, you feel empty without it. Prayer becomes the atmosphere of your life, not just an event in your day. It becomes the way you walk through storms, the way you make decisions, the way you fight battles, the way you find rest. It's not a part of your life, it is your life. And hear me on this, when you know God as Father, when you know you are his child, you stop praying scared prayers. You stop praying small prayers. You stop praying like someone who hopes they'll be heard. You start praying like someone who knows the door is already open. You start praying with the confidence that he sees, he knows, and he's moving, even when you don't feel it yet. That's why the enemy works so hard to distract you from real prayer, because he knows once you realize who you're praying to and who you are in him, your prayer life becomes a weapon. You start praying with faith, not fear, with clarity, not confusion, with purpose, not performance. Some of us have been settling for routine when God is inviting us into relationship. We've been clocking in and out of our quiet time like it's a job, when God is trying to meet us like it's a divine appointment. He's not just looking for people who pray, he's looking for people who know him. Because it's not what you say, it's who you say it to. And it's not just how long you say it, it's how deep you know the one you're talking to. So if you want your prayer to have power, if you want to see heaven move in your situation, if you want to live with purpose instead of frustration, start by anchoring your prayer in relationship. Make it personal, make it real. Strip away the performance, strip away the pressure. Just come as a child and talk to your Father. Because when you do, everything changes. That's where the power begins. Let's lean in a little further, because if you want your prayer life to carry weight, to carry divine authority, then you've got to understand this truth right here. Prayer with purpose doesn't just tell God what you want. It aligns your heart with what he wants. See, a lot of folks treat prayer like it's a one-way wish list. God, I need this. God, fix that. God, take care of them. God, give me more. And listen, I'm not saying you can't bring your requests to God. He welcomes them. He encourages it. But when your prayer life is only about you, your comfort, your plan, your timeline, you miss the greater purpose of why prayer was given in the first place. Prayer is not about controlling heaven. Prayer is about cooperating with heaven. It's not a tool to get God to say yes to your will. It's a sacred place where you surrender and say yes to his will. That's where the transformation happens. That's where the supernatural steps in. Because prayer with purpose isn't about twisting God's arm. It's about turning your heart until it beats in sync with his. You can tell when someone's been in that kind of prayer, there's a peace on them. There's a maturity to how they speak, how they walk through the fire, how they wait on God without panicking. Because they're not just praying for outcomes, they're praying for alignment. They're not just trying to get God to change their situation, they're asking God to use the situation to change them. And let me tell you, alignment is where the breakthrough begins. When Jesus taught us to pray, he didn't start with, give us this day our daily bread. No. He said, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Why? Because if you skip the alignment and jump straight to the request, you risk praying outside of what God is trying to do through your life. You might be asking him to move a mountain that he's trying to use to grow your faith. You might be praying for comfort when he's preparing you for calling. You might be praying for escape from something he wants to use as evidence of his glory. So many people are frustrated in their prayer lives, not because God hasn't spoken, but because they're asking for something he never promised. They're praying, Lord, make it easy, while God is saying, I'm trying to make you stronger. They're praying, God, remove it, while heaven is saying, no, I'm going to redeem it. When you begin to align with God's will, your prayers start to shift. You start praying less about convenience and more about kingdom, less about quick fixes and more about eternal fruit, less about your comfort zone and more about your character. And that kind of prayer, oh, that kind of prayer will shake the foundations of hell and invite the favor of heaven. But that kind of prayer requires trust. It means you've got to believe that God knows what he's doing, even when it hurts, even when it's delayed, even when it looks opposite to what you expected. It means you trust that if he doesn't give you what you ask for, it's only because he's got something better, something deeper, something more aligned with who he's shaping you to be. Do you remember Jesus in the garden? He prayed, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. That was his honest desire. That was his human cry. But then he aligned. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. That's the moment that changed history. That's the moment where surrender activated salvation. And if Jesus, the Son of God, had to align in prayer before fulfilling his purpose, how much more do we? There's nothing wrong with asking God for what you desire. He's a loving father. He delights in blessing his children. But what he wants more than anything is your trust. He wants to know that you're not just after his hand, you're after his heart. That you're not just seeking a solution, you're seeking surrender. You want your prayers to carry power? Stop praying from a place of panic and start praying from a place of positioning. Get in alignment. Say, Lord, this is what I desire, but more than that, I want what you desire for me. If you close this door, I'll praise you. If you open it, I'll walk through it. If you say wait, I'll trust your timing. If you say no, I'll trust your reason. Just don't let me step outside of your will, because I know that your will is where my purpose lives. That kind of prayer breaks cycles. That kind of prayer ends confusion. That kind of prayer silences fear. Because now, instead of trying to control the outcome, you're inviting the Creator to have his way. And when God has his way in your life, things move. Not always how you expect, but always how you need. So you might think the breakthrough is when the situation changes, but real breakthrough comes when you change. When your attitude shifts, when your focus sharpens, when your identity is rooted not in what God gives, but in who God is. And that only happens through aligned, purpose-driven prayer. So today I'm asking you, will you still pray when the answer isn't yes? Will you still trust when the road gets hard? Will you align even when it means letting go of something you thought was yours? Because if you will, if you'll bow not just your knees, but your will in prayer, God will do more than just hear you. He'll move through you. And when that happens, you won't just see your life shift. You'll watch heaven invade earth through every word you pray. Now let me take you even deeper, because if you really want to understand the weight and the wonder of prayer with purpose, you've got to know this. It's your greatest weapon in the battle. This is where a whole lot of people miss it. They think prayer is soft, that it's sweet, that it's for the quiet, the fragile, the overly spiritual. But let me tell you something. Prayer is not weak. Prayer is not passive. Prayer is warfare. It's where the real fight happens, because when you pray with purpose, you're not just talking. You're waging war in the spirit. See, life isn't just what you see. Behind every struggle, behind every delay, behind every door that won't open and every storm that won't cease, there is a battle going on that you can't see. It's spiritual, it's invisible, it's beyond the physical. And if you try to fight spiritual battles with physical weapons, you're going to lose every time. That's why some people are exhausted, not because life is harder for them, but because they're fighting the wrong way. They're trying to argue it out, cry it out, work it out, force it out. But what they need to do is pray it through. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That means your enemy isn't your boss or your spouse or that person who betrayed you. Your real enemy is operating behind the curtain, trying to steal your joy, your peace, your clarity, your purpose. And the only way to stand against that kind of attack is through purposeful prayer, not casual prayer, not rushed prayer, not half-hearted, distracted, multitasking prayer, but targeted, bold, spirit-led prayer that hits the enemy where it hurts. You know why the enemy tries so hard to keep you from praying? Because he knows that a praying believer is a problem to the kingdom of darkness. The moment you start praying with intention, he loses ground. Chains start to loosen, strongholds begin to crack, fear begins to melt, because purposeful prayer is the sound of heaven moving through earth. There's a story in the Bible about Daniel. He prayed, and for 21 days he didn't hear anything, no angel, no sign, no change. But what he didn't know, what we now know, was that the very moment he prayed, heaven heard him. And not only did heaven hear him, but heaven responded. The answer was on the way, but it was being resisted by spiritual forces in the unseen realm. That tells me something powerful. Just because you haven't seen the answer yet, doesn't mean it isn't already in motion. Just because the situation still looks the same, doesn't mean your prayer didn't work. It may be held up. It may be under attack. But if you stay in the posture of prayer, God will push it through. Some of you gave up on prayer right before the breakthrough was about to come. You walked away from your knees just when the angel was about to arrive. You let the silence convince you that heaven said no, when the truth is God said yes, but you had to keep praying to push through the warfare between his throne and your situation. Because let me tell you, prayer is not just preparation for the battle. Prayer is the battle. You don't pray after you've figured it out. You don't pray once you've tried everything else. You start in prayer, you stay in prayer, you finish in prayer. That's where strength is built. That's where perspective is shifted. That's where peace starts rising in the middle of chaos, not when it ends. When you fight through prayer, you may not always get a quick solution, but you'll get something even more powerful. You'll get spiritual authority. You'll begin to pray in a way that doesn't sound like panic, but purpose. You'll speak with a confidence that isn't rooted in what you see, but in who you know. You'll stop begging and start declaring. You'll stop complaining and start standing. You'll stop doubting and start believing again. That's what the enemy fears. Not just your prayer, but your persistent prayer. The kind of prayer that says, I will not stop, I will not be moved, I will not give up until I see the hand of God. That's how the walls of Jericho fell. That's how Peter was freed from prison. That's how Hannah got her son. That's how Elijah brought fire down from heaven. Not through fancy words, but through persistent, purposeful, powerful prayer that refused to back down. And some of you today are in the middle of your own spiritual battle. Maybe it's anxiety that won't let you sleep. Maybe it's a child who's wandered too far. Maybe it's a dream that's been buried under disappointment. Maybe it's an attack on your mind, your marriage, your ministry, your money. And you've tried everything else, but the battle hasn't budged. This is your moment to fight, not with fists, not with force, but with faith. On your knees, with tears in your eyes, but fire in your spirit. With worship on your lips and truth in your heart. Cry out. Stand firm. Speak his word. Stay locked in. Because when you pray with purpose in the middle of the battle, you don't have to wait for the victory to shout. You praise like the victory is already done. And here's the good news. The battle belongs to the Lord, but the weapon of prayer belongs to you. That means you're not fighting for victory, you're fighting from victory. You're not trying to earn God's attention, you already have it. You're not trying to make yourself worthy, Jesus already made you worthy. All you've got to do is pray with purpose, knowing that heaven backs every word that aligns with God's will. So if the fight has been long, if the silence has been loud, if the storm has been raging, this is not the time to shrink back. It's the time to rise up. Get in your prayer closet, lift your voice, stir your spirit, and go to war in the place where battles are truly won. Because when you pray with purpose in the midst of the battle, you don't just survive it, you conquer it. Let me take you to the heart of this message now. Because if you've been listening closely, you know prayer with purpose is more than just words. It's alignment with God, it's warfare in the spirit, and it's rooted in relationship. But don't miss this final truth, because this is where it becomes deeply personal. Prayer with purpose doesn't always change your circumstances first. Most times, it changes you. And that right there is where the real transformation begins. You see, we're quick to come to God with our lists. We pray for healing, for provision, for open doors, for breakthrough. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the mistake we often make is thinking the purpose of prayer is only to fix what's around us. That if God doesn't change the job, the diagnosis, the conflict, then the prayer didn't work. But let me ask you, what if God's first intention was not to change your situation, but to change you inside of it? There are some lessons you don't learn when everything's working. Some strength you never gain when everything's easy. Some faith you never develop when everything's going your way. That's why when you pray with purpose, God doesn't always remove the storm. He grows you in the storm. He shapes your soul. He matures your mind. He deepens your discernment. He chisels away the fear, the pride, the control, and he replaces it with trust, humility, patience, and peace. It's in those moments where you've prayed and nothing around you has shifted that God starts working within. And you might not even realize it at first, but then one day you wake up and the thing that used to crush you doesn't hit the same. The voice of fear that once ruled your thoughts is now just background noise. The anxiety that kept you up all night now bows to the peace that surpasses understanding. What changed? Maybe not your situation, but you were changed by the time you spent in his presence. Because real prayer doesn't just ask for change, it invites change. And when God starts changing you, that's when you know your prayers are full of purpose. When you stop saying, God, get me out, and start saying, God, grow me through this, you've stepped into maturity. That's when you move from praying out of emotion to praying from revelation. And that's when heaven begins to trust you with more responsibility, more authority, more influence, not because you're louder in prayer, but because you're deeper in prayer. Do you remember Paul? That man prayed. He prayed with fire. He prayed with authority. But even he had something he wanted removed. He called it a thorn in his flesh. He asked God 3 times to take it away, but God said no, not because Paul lacked faith, not because Paul wasn't aligned, but because God wanted to do something deeper in him. And what did God say? My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. In other words, Paul, I'm not going to change the situation because the situation is how I'm changing you. That's a hard word, but it's a freeing word because it means your prayers are never wasted. Even if the circumstance doesn't shift, you're still growing. You're still being shaped. God is still doing a holy work in your heart. And when the time is right, when the growth has produced fruit, when your character has caught up to your calling, then God will release what you've been praying for, but he loves you too much to give it before you're ready. There are things you're asking for that would crush you if he gave them too soon. There are doors you're knocking on that God won't open yet because he's still building your endurance for what's on the other side. Prayer with purpose is what makes you ready. Ready for the weight, ready for the responsibility, ready for the blessing that won't break you when it comes. Some of you are in a season right now where you feel like your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. But the silence doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes the silence is where he's doing the deepest work, because it's in that silence that he purifies your motives. He sanctifies your desires. He shifts your perspective from God, give me more, to God, make me more like you. When that happens, when your heart becomes the altar and your life becomes the sacrifice, then you're not just praying with purpose, you're living in purpose. Prayer isn't just something you do to get results. It's something God uses to produce fruit. And the first fruit isn't around you, it's within you. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness. Those things don't show up because you ask for a new house. They show up when you spend time in the presence of the one who makes you whole. So if God hasn't answered the way you expected, don't walk away. Don't give up. Don't stop praying. Look in the mirror and see the miracle already in progress. See how your heart is softer. See how your worship is deeper. See how your spirit is stronger. See how you don't panic like you used to. Don't quit like you used to. Don't complain like you used to. That's what happens when you pray with purpose. You're transformed, not just informed. You're renewed, not just relieved. And that transformation becomes the evidence that God is working even in the waiting. Prayer with purpose turns you into the kind of person who can handle the thing you're praying for, because it prepares you, grows you, humbles you, strengthens you. And then when the timing is divine and the vessel is ready, the answer comes. Not to rescue you, but to reveal that God was faithful all along. So don't rush it. Don't resent it. Don't retreat. Stay planted. Keep praying. Keep trusting. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not that God changed your situation, but that he changed you right in the middle of it.